Welcome back. You're listening to episode 2 of Rentability. I'm Marla, and today we're chatting about the good old rental standards in Victoria. Join us as we hear from Renew's very own sustainable housing advocate, Rob McLeod, and Bernie Barrett from advocacy group Better Renting. Welcome. Today is obviously a very exciting day because this is actually the first time we've recorded in person. I've usually done it online, so very exciting. And I'm joined with Rob, who's Renew's very own sustainable housing advocate. Would you want to tell us a bit about your role at Renew?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. So I work at Renew in policy and advocacy, and so it's my job to represent consumers and represent households to government.
Just a disclaimer for you guys, we will be talking about minimum standards in Victoria. If you guys are listening from outside of Victoria, it's probably best to, take this with a grain of salt, compare the standards that your state has and, check out your state's standards. Nonetheless, I'm sure there'll be some great information for you all. And now, Rob, what do you think about our standards for renters?
More and more people are renting, both here in Victoria and in other parts of Australia. It's about 1 in 3 households rent, and we know that rental homes at the moment just aren't up to scratch. We know that renters are more likely to live in homes that are energy inefficient, more likely to live in homes that have deficiencies like no insulation or poor heating, energy inefficient appliances. And it comes at a cost to renters. It means that people who are renting their home are both paying more in their energy bills and also living in homes that are colder in winter, hotter in summer, and less healthy to live in. It means that we need a policy response to that, putting in strong minimum standards that all rental homes need to meet. And that should include things like insulation, it should include things like efficient appliances, it should include a healthy home that keeps people that's safe to live in and healthy to live in.
What does it mean in the minimum standards? Obviously, they're doing one thing right. They're focusing on heating, and I think it's going up to 2 stars next year. Like the heater has to be energy efficient.
Yeah, so on the back of years of campaigning, the Victorian government did agree to minimum standards for rental homes that are a step in the right direction, but also need to go a lot further. So the minimum, there is now going to be a requirement. In most rental homes, there already is this requirement as of last year, 2021, that homes will need to have a fixed heater in the main living area, which, a pretty crazy number of homes don't. Like when this was assessed a couple of years ago, about 11%, 12% of homes in Victoria had no heater, and renters were required to, either live in freezing cold or to provide their own portable heater, which comes at a huge cost. This minimum standard means that rental homes will now need to have a fixed heater in the main space that meets at least a 2-star minimum requirement. That's good. It's a step in the right direction. It also, in my view and our view, should go a lot further.
So I believe you've also said that the vast majority of heaters on the market are 2 stars. So really, the minimum standards aren't necessarily doing a lot.
There are only about 2% of heaters that you can buy on the entire list of heaters out there that are 1 star or less. 2 stars is a pretty minimum level, and we think it should be ratcheted up. There should be a requirement for 3 or 4 star heaters at least, as well as getting homes off gas towards efficient or electric reverse cycle air conditioners, which is going to be the best bang for your buck when it comes to heating and cooling rental homes.
Yeah. And what does a switch from gas to electric mean?
We're in the middle of a major energy transition. We're shifting away from fossil fuels in general to more renewables, both through distributed energy resources like rooftop solar as well as centralised renewables, so wind, large-scale solar. As that happens, homes will need to be electrified.
The concern here is that homes will be left behind.
You're one of the last homes still connected to the gas network when so many other people have decided to make the switch. You're going to have higher costs locked in for you. My real worry is that it's going to be renters, people on low incomes, people with limited security of tenure, people who are going to struggle with the upfront cost of a transition. They're going to be the people who are left who are going to be least able to get off gas, and it's going to come at a cost to them. They're going to be the ones who are bearing the cost of the whole thing. We need governments to step in to make sure that renters are a part of the energy transition, not left behind in the energy transition, as well as people on low-income, people who are living in social housing as well. It's a really, really critical piece of the picture. What we know is that shifting from gas to all electric homes powered by renewables not only reduces emissions, it also cuts household costs substantially. Renew's done the numbers on this. We've modelled this out in homes in all capital cities, and what we've found is that shifting from a dual fuel home with gas appliances and no solar to an all electric home with efficient electric appliances and solar will be cutting household bills by, often well over $1,000 a year. And that means real savings in the pockets of renters as well as everyone else.
So, if we know how much we can save, then why is the uptake still so slow?
In particular for renters, a major issue is that the system is stacked against you if you're renting your home when it comes to energy efficiency. So if you own your home, you can just choose to switch your appliances, you pay the upfront cost, and then you get the benefits of the bill savings on an ongoing basis. If you're renting your home, you can't do that. You need to depend on your landlord to make that upfront switch. Now, even if you decided that you wanted to pay out of your own pocket as a renter and you were in a position to do that, you have no tenure, you have no security of tenure. And what that could mean is that you could spend money on solar panels. And then at the end of your lease in 6 months' time, your landlord can say, oh, well, sorry, but I'm kicking you out. And then they'll re-advertise the home at a higher rate with advertising the solar panels as an extra perk. It means that renters are systematically locked into worse energy performance than owner-occupiers. Now, there's been a study that's come out this year that's shown that, leave aside the question of renewables, just on the basis of energy efficiency alone, renters are paying 8% more on average for their energy bills in a like-for-like home than owner-occupiers. Otherwise identical homes are less efficient for renters, and renters are paying higher bills because of this structural problem in our system. Again, it means that we need to change how that market works, and we need governments to step in. And minimum standards is one really, really important part of that.
And there is that sort of power imbalance between, I guess, tenants and landlords. What would you say about that? Sort of how does that come about? And is there anything we can do to sort of change that?
Yeah, so look, more and more people are renting. The number of people who are able to buy a home has steadily decreased over the last generation in Australia, and that trend is continuing. I'm really, really concerned that if housing is just left to the market alone, then this trend is just going to continue deepening.
And what can governments do to support renters?
Governments also need to strengthen the minimum standards and the rules for renting out homes that exist. So it's great that we have a requirement for heating in all homes, but that's also not enough. The Victorian government has promised to introduce standards for requiring insulation and efficient hot water. They promised it 2 or 3 years ago now and still haven't delivered at the time of me recording this. And so I would really, really like to see them come through with that and deliver on that promise of standards for insulation. That's something that has happened in New Zealand, and it's been very, very important and successful there. It's something that the ACT government is in the process of delivering now, and all states should be following through on that, including Victoria.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to ask about insulation because, what's the point in having an energy efficient heater if you can't even keep that heat in the house?
Yeah, insulation is a really, really critical part of the picture. So we know that the best way to make homes healthier and to reduce energy bills is a combination of efficient appliances, so reverse cycle air conditioners, heat pumps with a decent energy efficiency rating, alongside insulation. So particularly ceiling insulation is the most important way of keeping heat in your home or keeping your home cool in summer. There's good research out from Energy Consumers Australia and others, which finds that rental homes are less likely to have insulation than owner-occupied homes. And I think that that's deeply, deeply unfair. Leaving it to the market has not worked. And so we need to step in with actual minimum standards that all homes need to meet.
And jumping back to rebates, there are obviously things available, especially in Victoria. Do you think that they're helping at the moment? Because I didn't know that there were rebates available. So I probably think that there's a lot of other landlords who are in the same situation.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I think that we want to get the word out because this is actually a really good opportunity, not just for landlords and not just for tenants, also people who meet the eligibility requirements, so people on low incomes. There is an opportunity to replace inefficient heating and cooling with efficient reverse cycle air conditioners, and to do it in a way that's really, really cost effective thanks to these programs. We don't know how many have been taken up at this stage. I'm hopeful that it's many, and I think that we need to do more to get the word out as well, because if you haven't heard about it, I think there's probably other people out there who haven't as well. And I encourage anyone who's listening to this podcast, check to see whether you need it. Talk to the people you know to find out whether they've accessed it as well, because it's a really good opportunity and a really good program.
Something that you've mentioned is to improve public and social housing. How does that help the situation?
The waiting lists for public housing have bumped out to years and years and years. Even people who are facing housing crisis and housing emergency situations are looking down the barrel of a years long wait for a home in our public housing system. And we really need to change that by building more. That is an opportunity to build high quality, energy efficient homes that are connected to solar, connected to renewables, which will not only address the housing crisis and the homelessness crisis that's being faced by so many households in Victoria and other states at the moment, but also can support industry to get ready for the broader transition in housing as well, and build up those skills, build up those supply chains that can flow through to other homes in across the country as well. So so building more social housing is a really, really critical part of the picture.
Thank you so much to Rob for joining us and chatting about rental standards. We'll be back shortly with Bernie, who also has some really great insights for you guys.
I'm Bernie Barrett. I work for Better Renting and I coordinate the Healthy Homes for Renters Collaboration, which is a national collaboration of nearly 120 organisations and almost 3,000 individuals who are all working together to urge state and territory governments to implement minimum energy efficiency standards in rental homes.
What do you sort of think about the minimum standards and how they could be improved, I guess?
So any introduction of new rental standards is a really good start, but there's definitely room for improvement in Victoria's standards. I think in terms of energy efficiency, the introduction of the minimum standard for a 2-star heater is good. It will make a big difference to people who previously had nothing in their homes to heat them over winter. And we know Victoria has some really bitterly cold winters, so it will make an immediate difference in the lives of a lot of people. But the potential downsides, it's not that ambitious to have a 2-star heater. And the fact that the heaters can still be run on gas or even wood burning, it's not great for people's health, especially people's respiratory health. It's also not the most sustainable option.
So, I guess my main concern with the minimum standards were that, we're having 2-star heating, but then we have no talk about insulation. So then how does that fit together? Because we can't heat homes and then it just go out to nothing. And, we're spending all this money on heating, but it's not actually the home's not actually being heated as such?
Yeah, well, we've worked with a big group of renters over the last year doing a project called Renter Researchers. And I think that what we've heard from renters is they often describe their homes as tents. It's you wouldn't put a heater on in a tent. It's full of gaps. It's just basically heating the environment outside of your home as much as anything. And so I think it is unfortunate to think that some people will have these not that efficient heaters in their homes, and not really heating the space to a healthy temperature. That World Health Organization, 18 degrees. It's going to be hard for a home to reach that temperature and keep it that temperature if it's not insulated and if it's drafty and full of leaks and gaps. So these things have to work together. But I do understand that something has to come first.
And I guess when this podcast gets released, it's going to be mid-Australian summer. How do you think the minimum standards should have covered cooling?
Not having an insulated home and not having adequate cooling in your home is probably one of the worst combinations you can have as a renter. We heard from renters in Victoria who their home reached, close to 37 degrees in summer last year. One of the renters in particular spoke about the lack of insulation above in the ceiling above their kitchen. And when they were cooking in summer, they would stand at their oven and they would feel heat radiating on the top of their head because the sun was just blasting down on their roof and was effectively, they're trying to cook and they're being cooked themselves from their ceiling. They had an air conditioner in their lounge room, but it was the original air conditioner from when the house was built in the 1970s, one of those big brown box air conditioners. I don't know if you've ever seen those, but they're awful. They're so inefficient. But I know that person's story is one of millions in Victoria. And if you don't have insulation, if you don't have window coverings, if you don't have an efficient air conditioner, your health is really impacted. People were telling us that, it was still 30 degrees in their room when they were trying to sleep at night. It had a huge impact on their mental health. People weren't able to wake up and feel rested to go to work the next day. People were having to call in sick. So you think about the productivity loss as well. And so by not having standards that directly address heat is a big gap.
And in terms of renting, do you think that there's a double standard between rentals and owner-occupied homes?
There's a big power imbalance between owner-occupied homes and renters who live in homes. And that power imbalance really comes into play around minimum energy efficiency standards. From experience and from what we know of renters, unless there's an urgent need for a repair or an improvement to be made in a home, landlords and real estate agents and property investors are often unwilling to just make general improvements. So, I, as a renter myself, know that if I had better insulation in my home and some draft ceiling, my home would be a lot warmer in winter. But I can't go to the shops and buy ceiling insulation and put it in my home myself. I have to go through a process, and it's very likely that would be rejected because a landlord wouldn't want to spend that money. There's also a lack of availability to take part in incentive programs that exist. A lot of incentive programs that governments roll out are only for owner occupiers. And so it's hard to tap into those resources that are being made available to owner occupiers. So that makes a big impact. We need to have a system that allows renters to assert their rights and go to their landlords and their real estate agents and say when there's a problem, or have a system that doesn't rely on renters.
And where does the responsibility lie for a healthy home? Is it more renters? Is it landlords, or is it governments as a whole to sort of provide that system?
Housing is an essential service. If you have chosen to buy a property that you are going to rent out, you have willingly chosen to provide an essential service. All essential services have regulations to ensure that they meet standards, and housing shouldn't be different. And so I think it's a combination. There needs to be regulations in place set by government, and those standards need to be met by landlords to ensure that homes are healthy. But obviously, if you're living in the home, you need to upkeep and make sure that you're not making any changes to the home that would make it less efficient. But the responsibility for ensuring and having a system to check whether homes are energy efficient needs to come from government with some sort of minimum standards regulation, and a way to measure that home, whether it's a features based standard or like a performance based standard. But then meeting that standard, landlords and investors need to make sure that they're meeting that.
If you've made it this far, thank you so much for listening. I hope I've taken you on a journey through a bit of the rental standards in Victoria. As again, if you are not in Victoria, I hope you've gained some more in depth understanding about what the actual issues are. And we'll see you in episode 3 for a bit more of a chat about what renters can do right now.